Okay, so finally, 1997, right, when Teo Chee Hean became Minister for Education,
Yeah.
Thinking Schools, Learning Nation, National Education. Were you surprised initially by these changes?
I met Teo a few times, and then as a principal, but later when I went to the ministry, he was still there. He had quite a long term from 97 to 2003. All right, so that's about 8 years, 8, 9 years that he was there. He was a man who had some background to teaching, not himself, but his wife was a teacher. So that counts. And I think he was more willing to uh, push for certain things that the school needed, right? That the investment, not just in infrastructure. Okay, even then, the late 1997 infrastructure was beginning to look old and some of that. But he felt more the curriculum change, the methodology, and the quality of teaching also needs some reform. So therefore, I think he was the one who instituted this 1997 great reform to us. Thinking School, Learning Nation was one of the things, and of course, it's followed by NE creative thinking was part of that Thinking School, Learning Nation. All right, creative thinking, and of course, also he was willing to use his clout, or I think he was well respected in the cabinet, and he was willing to push for budget for even IT at that point of time. IT was one of the big things, the master plan that Mr. Admiral Teo brought about in schools. Okay, so if you ask me, I would say that uh, we were quite pleasantly surprised. We were, all right. But after I've learned about what he had gone through himself, his wife must have said something that he was more of a person who was more inclined towards slightly more decentralization, actually. But by the way, we are still very centralized, all right? But there were at the margin or at some point there will be changes, like independent school came about in the 1980s when Dr. Tony Tan was minister. Then, of course, we had the cluster system instituted by Teo Chee Hean. Now, these are critical points because the cluster system, to me, was one of the big factor in terms of allowing autonomy to school. They talk about autonomy in school slightly early in the mid 1990s, but nobody really could do anything if you have the inspectorate. The inspectorate was a dead weight to the whole system because they were not uh, people who are sold or have sense of belonging to the school which they supervise. All right, they would only be there as a reporting officer. Of course, when you have a problem, you speak to them, but they will say, "Yeah, yeah, I'll bring it up." But whether they did or not, we are not sure. All right, but the point was that the cluster system give a sense of belonging to the cluster soup, who handle say 11, 12, 13 schools or whatever. She or he would be empowered by the ministry to make decisions on a certain lump sum of money for the school to effect changes. So that is devolution of support in terms of the materials sense. All right. Then he or she, the cluster soup, will also be measured not so much just by the exams performance of the student, but by how this soup will be able to bring about change in the school to a better better form of organization where there are more collaboration, there are more willingness to learn from each other. This thing about learning organization was a period when the Emperor Teo and his team felt that school needs to devolve and to be empowered in that sense. Now, I would say that this period was really a phase where the aspiration was on a belief that all talents and ability should be equally be recognized, to be valuable, and be nurtured as well. So that means a diversity of talents being accepted. Whether it be intellectual, art, sports, or other endeavors to be treasured and developed for their interest and their potential as well. So those were the things that I thought were the intangible that comes about, and not so much on the hardware. Although the hardware came about as well with the generous funding through the cluster system as well. Because I experienced that when I moved next to a government school in 1998. I remember very clearly we were very badly off shape in terms of the infrastructure in the school. It was an old building. The building was wearing thin, and also the technology part. My IT head was very keen to move into the next phase, but we were short of money. The school had no proper funding, and the actual operation fund that come from ministry regularly were not that to be used for those things. So the cluster, we approached the cluster, and the cluster soup worked with the whole lot of the cluster board. We call it a cluster board, where we were represented by principal of the 11th school or 10th school. So she chairs the meeting, and we, as the board, had our share of inputs to how the big share of money. I'm not sure how many percent. Probably, I will guess that the budgeting that comes down from ministry, they will take about 20% and put it under the cluster soup. All right, at least 20%, I believe. So that big sum of money to be spent on the school that needs. So we make a bid, or we have to apply to the cluster soup, and the other principal will also make the bid, and they will discuss and see which school needs. And I think that's very critical. They, as principal, knows or know that knew then that each school has its own peculiarity. Each school is its own characteristic. And for example, we have people from the higher end, like Anglican High, or from maybe another school like Dunman or whatever. They knew that schools like in the neighborhood were much more in need, so they were willing to take a smaller share of that pie and give it to those schools that at that lower end. And I think that helped. And it was a sort of a give and take form of thing. And I think that we felt that there was a sense of ownership by the soup, by the all the cluster board, and by the teachers, because we share. And I would personally say that not just taking the money and building the infrastructure of the IT. And I built another one which called the NE room to bring about a sharing for the cluster. I make sure that when we have brought about those changes and bought those equipment, whatever, we will ask the other school in the cluster, they were welcome to come in at certain time to not only learn, but also maybe the student could use together with. They were sharing of the feeling of camaraderie, the feeling that we are together in this, and they will give and take. So I think that helps that change or transformation or reform that came about during that period. So thinking school, learning nation was a good idea, but besides that, the other structural change also came about. All right. May I speak a little bit about the thinking part of it?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. The thinking part of it was really task that I think was paradox. Actually, it was a paradox to me, because if you want your school to think, if you want the principal and the teachers and the students to think, then there are many things that they will be be prepared, or they will be willing to question the top, you know. But that was not the culture then. So they try to channel and said, I'm talking about not just the political leadership in the ministry. I'm talking about that middle part where they are the civil servant, they are the director of school, director of education, or later on they call it DGE, Director General Education. Oh, okay. Then, and they are directors. They feel that they have to control, that sense of control. So thinking school and learning nation. Okay, learning nation is not really a problem, but the schools, if we want us to think, then you must free up this channel for us, not just to give feedback, but to criticize. But they were not prepared for that. I'm sorry, at that point of time, you know, they were not prepared for it. I spoke to the political leaders to bypass these people, and Teo Chee Sien said, "Yeah, but I can understand both parties." He said, "Boon Long, I can understand you, but we could not move too fast where that middle class, I will call them the class of leaders, were very were ossified. You know, let me give you an illustration. That when Dr. Goh came in 1978, 79, he demolished that class, but uh, but of course it make a comeback. You know, after he left, he demolished the class, meaning he sent out all those who are responsible for being so stuck in their way of not willing to be open to the ground feeling and all those things. All right. So you find that not only the director of education, the director of school, Lim Kin Woon, was pushed out, and the other directors like Vijay Singh, the other Mr. Lim, and all quite a few, and including Moss Virgin. All right, those were the directors at that time. So that happened after a period of time when they built the empires. So again, even in 1997, it took greater effort, but because we had somebody on our side by 1998, when we had a cluster, the soup was a mediator between the that just below the political leadership, the directors and all that. So she has some form of feedback to them. So gradually the feeling changed, and also by then I think Miss Xia Jiakchu was the director of school, and Mr. Wee Ying Tin was still the director of education by the 97, 98, 97, 98, by the 9. By the 2000, Xia Jiakchu was a more progressive person. Miss Xia Jiakchu was a director of school. I know her since Raffles RJC days. All right, she was one of the teachers there, but she was more progressive, and she moved as a director of DGE when Wee Heng Tin retired in the 2000. I'm not sure which year, but early 2000. All right, 2000. So those things changed at the leadership level, but it was not just a slaughtering, or it was just not simply ousting them like Dr. Goh Keng Swee. So it took some time, but Teo Chee Hean saw to it that there was this effort made, and I think we appreciate it. So thinking school, learning nation, they interpret it, or at least from the director point of view, they interpret it as a student to think along certain line. Oh, what a strange instruction was that to me as a principal. By then I was, yeah, I was in Bedok Town. I said, you want us to think along the line, and then so we are not thinking then, yeah. But there was no answer to that. So they put in things like entrepreneurship. Now, entrepreneurship is not a thinking skill, but entrepreneurship to them is effort to build enterprise, to be more willing to take risks and all those things, right? But it is not really something about thinking skill. Creative thinking will be more in line with that. So creative thinking, we would align it to subjects not in the maths or science, but align it to the humanities, all right? More into literature and perhaps even in history, geography, possibly, and definitely in social sciences, all right, in social studies. Okay, so there was this bottleneck. To me, there was a bottleneck for some years about the thinking part, all right? The other part moved faster. The NE and IT part moved faster, all right? Because in the end, we compromise that thinking about entrepreneurship. We say we want enterprising student, not student who become entrepreneurs. That's really short sighted, because if you want to be entrepreneurs, then you have to start doing business, uh, and you may learn some of the things which in thinking wise would not be appropriate, because they may cut corners here and there as entrepreneurs and all that. Okay, but anyway, there was a slower growth, slower development on the thinking part, and I would say that NE moves slightly faster because value inculcation of national values, all that comes in, and the key thing was about the five NE messages. All right, the five NE messages will be things like we don't owe anyone the defense of Singapore. That's defense, and then we be able to defend ourselves. Then we also believe that we have to be uh, really not just be a Singaporean, but also to believe in the feeling that we are able to share, embrace multiculturalism or multi racialism. All right, that's a racial, the racial integration part of our society. A few others, but basically, NE was not a subject per se. It was infused into the subjects like history, geography, or social studies or whatever. Even in maths and science, sometimes they try to artificially create certain things, learning problems, and to put in. But it was again top down. Okay, it was again top down, which when I took over later in 2001, 2002 at the OMI, I felt that it was really very top down. We at the ministry tell the school what to do. So I said, no, no, no. I think that, and luckily by then, Mr. Taman came in and he accepted that. He wasn't a minister, he was minister only in 2003. And he really pushed that part of it because he actually was on the panel which actually formed for national education, Mr. Taman. All right. So he said, yeah, you cannot just thrust down the throat of anyone and then you'll find yourself being called as a propaganda chief. And I agree. Yeah, my son called me that. All right. So, but the fact of the matter is, you must allow the ground up initiative to take place, to how to bring about the greater love for our nation and the greater identity with our flag or our pledge or whatever. Those things will be more a live experience to them than just say, okay, let's recite and do things according to the syllabus in NE. So NE was not a subject, but yet it was seen to be a push down effort in the early years from 1997. Then when Wong Siu Hoon was the first DD, then Mark Lyon. And when I came in, Mark Lyon also did some changes, but when I came in, I felt that should move on. So I had a longer term there. They were all shorter, 2 years, 3 years. I had up to 2006. So that's probably about 5, 6 years. So I had a greater chance to make changes. Yeah.
So you kind of was then trying to also sort of decentralize national education, not
Yeah.
so top down.
Yeah. So we said that the efforts uh, the early years, they will go and measure things like how the student feel for the nation, and they do surveys all that. Okay, fine. You want to do it as a snapshot over there, but you don't take that and say that school is lesser than another school in terms of NE effort or whatever it is. So I think our feeling was that we decentralized the school and allow them to come up with their own programs, yeah, to which they will make it more meaningful, more enjoyable for the student, rather than to say one size fit all and here are the thing. Of course, we became more of a supportive agency at the ministry, meaning that we were not a supervisory, or we were not someone that initiate efforts. And right, okay, they were already in place. Some of the things like we put in the LKY award for NE, or that school can apply, but we didn't say that every school will be measured for that. Those who feel that they are in ready, they just do it. All right. And so there were many other points where we don't want to say every teacher must attend this any seminar. Okay, so you make up your point that the schools can do their own, right? And so they did. And so by then, because the cluster was more solidified, the cluster did something which I think was very useful, because it was not coming from the HQ or MOE. The cluster formed their own NE committee, and they helped the school to see which school needs more resources, which school needs more effort or whatever to help them with it. So again, a decentralized form, which I thought was a blessing, because I came from the cluster system. And so I encourage all other clusters. Once we had this experimental cluster, the North and the East, these two cluster, they implemented, they rolled it out into other schools by the 2000. Most schools, I mean, most areas we had the clusters in place. All right. So when I went to ministry, in fact, most of the schools were in cluster already. Okay. So the good thing about cluster also is that they are not just from secondary school or not just from primary school. So there is a crossover between the primary and secondary, and we learn from the primary. The primary also learn from us. Okay, so those are the things that help in the not just in NE, but even in sharing of resources in terms of even academic subjects or even IT or whatever. Okay, so those are the things. I forgot to mention something else on the TSLN.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
TSLN.
Yeah.
That is TLLM. Teach less, learn more.
Mm.
That's another big. I mean, um, the teacher said, "Yeah, we can cut down the curriculum," but what happened is that, meaning teach less of the content. But what happened is that they were still being measured by the principal or by the MOE, that how the student fare in the exam. Because if you cut down, there's a risk that I'm not sure. I'm not taught for sometimes. They will tell me and say, Mr. Koh, we cut down too much, then the student will be not able to perform in the exam well. All right. So that's teaching less of content actually. And then they ask about things about teaching less. Um, Certainly they can move faster, right? Then what happened if towards the end of the year they covered most of the syllabus? So what do you do? Um, that's one big problem. And then they also said things like, you ask us to teach less content, but doesn't that apply to my timetable, my teaching period? Why am I teaching more periods, and but I go to class and I try to waste time there and try and do things there. So again, it didn't go down very well in the school. And to me, I agree. It sounds very nice. Now, teach less. What is TLLM? Teach less, learn more. It didn't learn more. I think yeah, it was about time that the actual revision should not be done at the school level. we should actually cut the exam board what content area they should not examine the student on. And those can be optional for the school to pick it up for the interest of the student or whatever, right? But that was not done. So it is a mismatch in some ways. But eventually they go around to this and they try to get the SEAB. That time the SEAB was formed. The Singapore Exam and Assessment Board was formed to try to make sure that they're in line with what this initiative, Teach Less, Learn More, should bring about. So again, it's a matter of implementation issues, which sometimes but sometimes a slogan or a tagline sounds beautiful, but if they don't examine it carefully at the school level, it's being sabotaged in some ways. All right. There's some principal would just close their eyes. I would say I will address it, but I would have to make sure that you people understand why they do it, but at the same time, we will try to concede to what they feel was troubling them. Right. So there is this negotiation process. Yeah. Okay. So that I miss out on that. And of course, IT, by and large, IT for the younger teachers, there were no issue. All right. They absorb it, they embrace it, they accept it very carefully. The issue was with the older teachers, and some of them about to retire, and they were fumbling with those things there. And then if you assess, that's a problem. Assessment is because you put in something, you want to assess whether IT is being spread or not. Then you do that at the school level. The older teachers feel very, very pressurized to try to do PowerPoint, for example, at that point of time. Every lesson must have PowerPoint. Then they really get stuck, all right? Because they will break down. In fact, I remember at Bedok Town, a few of them broke down. I said, okay, wait, just leave it alone and go back to old meeting issue, but just don't speak to the board and get students to be aboard. You can interact with the student, get them to interact with themselves or that. In other words, don't just be teacher centered. Get some. Basically, IT helps more in the learning in groups, but at the same time, the teacher had to prepare much more. And so it goes against this teach less, learn more, because your lesson will have to be much greater preparation for the older set at least, you know. And so they say, we are all bogged down with all this style initiative become. It was a big show because in 1997 there were so many things going at one go. And I think to looking back, that was one of the main concern to me. You push too many things at one go. And I think Taman slowed that down a bit somewhat. And Taman did more on the fact of getting things that pathways in school. And so that didn't affect the teacher too much on curriculum part. Okay, so I would say that it was a good thing to have this special system for, it is actually a system to a knowledge-based economy. I'm not sure what that means, but the objective as put down, it said it should be to help students to have a knowledge-based economy. Yeah, maybe. So thinking has process has something to do with it, and IT also the knowledge-based economy and all that. So that's the one. But the next stage, can I go to the next stage? You mentioned values. That's more the fourth phase. The fourth. We are talking about the ability-driven operational one, which is phase 3.
Mm-hmm.
So that value thing comes into the fourth because it is by Heng Swee Keat, who came in 2011. Yeah, you see, if you look at the ministers, Teo Chee Hean, Mr. Taman, in the ability-driven, the person that didn't do much, sorry to say, was Mr. Ng Ee Hian. He was from 2008 to 2011. All right. So when Heng Swee Keat came in, he had he was ambitious. He feels that he had to do something different from from the previous phase and Mr. Taman has overshadowed him, I think, maybe. But whatever it is, he started this thing together. I think Chi Ming, not so much, but Ong Yi Kang came in slightly later. But all this were together the student-centered and value-driven part of it. Okay, so if you ask me about religious knowledge, that would be part of the values, right? Is it part of value-driven? But that was earlier. Yeah, that was earlier. Yeah. Okay. So if you ask me about the value part, NE will be one of the things that go on to Heng Swee Keat, but more his. Can I say that Mr. Heng was more concerned about um, individual schools not being looked down upon? So he had this phrase, all schools are good schools. And that became a joke, actually. All schools are good schools. Later he modified that. All schools are good schools. He meant that they have every ingredient or they have some specific to that region or to that area where the student could benefit. All right, the characteristic. His exact term, I don't have it here, but it would be that something like every school is a good school, right? Every school is a good school. But that's a joke because not every school is a good school. Yeah, if you define how good is, because at the mindset of our population, of our parents, would be that good means good exam results. All right. So if you don't define it, then you will fall in this trap that you are making a false statement, right? So he was trying his best. I don't blame him for that, but I think strictly speaking, um, there are different type of school. He could say that many years ago, LKY, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew said, school must have a character. There must be not just faceless. And this was in the 60s. He spoke to the principal. I'm not sure. Could be early 60s. Yeah, even before we became independent. He said, look, your schools are blooming all over, meaning they were building lots of schools. And then what happened? Everyone looks alike. The building looks alike, but internally, everyone just do the same curriculum and everyone follow the same rule from Ministry of Education. So you have to build a character. But it's easier said than done. You want to build a school character, meaning the ethos, the history, the tradition must come in, right? And it's not easy for a new school that suddenly you just implant the formula right in. Okay, he said that. But by the 2011, when Heng Swee came, the school has a long history. I mean, some history, all right? So he can say that each school has its own character, and each of the characters in the school could be beneficial. In that sense, is a good for the student there. I think later he tried to do that, but people always remember his first page. Every school is a good school. So that was his, bugbear to him. I think. All right, but whatever it is, he set out with good intention. That I can say. Yeah. Okay. So value inculcation. One of the things that moved towards value inculcation, I would say, was very good was SEL, social emotional learning. Social emotional learning was during this period that was introduced, and it was not just academic curriculum. It was not something that we could just do it without that cultural change in each one of us, so that we can respect the person and the person learn to be socially that EQ part, but also more beyond that, to be able to empathize, to be able to understand the depth of feeling, and to able to understand their own self, how it can react to certain processes of stress and all that. So social emotional learning was that. But I'm not sure how successful it has been, because by then I've left. 2011 I've left, but certainly that was a good thing that they put in. And of course, the other one they made the change, I would say, was very good too. The CCE, um, character and citizenship education, that changed the outlook of NE. Because when you look at NE, it actually the name doesn't sound right. The name national education. Okay, it's education to love your nation, yeah, maybe. But if you put it as character and citizenship education, the last part, citizenship, then I think it makes more sense to our students and our teachers. All right. So this came about during Ms. Heng Soo Kiat's time, and I think I'm not sure that uh, how much of it would have been effective if his counterpart, I think his counterpart was Mr. Ng. No, okay, that was later. He was alone as a minister for education, 2011, 2015. All right, and that next 5 years or next 2, 3 years, 2016 to 2018, and Ong Ye Kung moved even later, 2020. That 4 to 5 years for Ong Ye Kung, and Ng Chi Ming was very short term there, but he was for higher education, right? Was it? No, Ong Ye Kung was for higher education. Can you remember? Ong Ye Kung. Yeah, Ong Ye Kung was for higher education. Ng Chi Ming was for school education. For school education. All right, he didn't know. I mean, really, I from my gathering of principal and some teachers, they said that they didn't see much change, but of course, Heng Swee Keat has set some formula there, all right, to bring about this fact of student-centric learning and value driven, right? Student-centric, meaning that they were given leeway to do things on their own, to bring about changes in their own life, part of the social emotional part of the learning. Then the character and citizenship education. So ND became embedded under this CCE. All right. So that's a change, and that name change actually helped because then they have a period. I'm not sure how many period per week they have actually fixed into the timetable allocation. So that is firm in there. But of course, it's not a non-examination, and it's useful for students in that sense. All right. So when they come to SSB, they could bring in different group of students. It is non-examination. Okay, so that's the value part, and he believed that value calculation to him needs to be strengthened. I think that's the 2011 aspect. Yeah.
You cover a lot of the history of education in Singapore.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
want to ask you a series of questions and then you can answer.
Okay.
Yeah. Number one, right? Cambridge exams. Should we get rid of them?
Cambridge exam, yes.
Should we get rid of them?
No, definitely not. To me, we are an independent nation. It's not only that, but I think we have equally good officers at the SCAB, and we can justify the fact that we can certify in schools. I mean, at the JC level, they have their own diploma, Raffles diploma, and all that. Why is it that certification must come from a syndicate overseas? I don't just say it's foreign that I'm against, but also it costs more than if you do it locally. All right, that's one. But the credibility is probably for some parents that it should bring about to foreign universities and all that. Okay, but if you have a proper diploma or a cert based on Singapore syndicate or proper board, which is SEAB, our education system is already recognized worldwide as one that is respectable, not only respectable but also among the top few, whatever it is. Why is it that we still hang on to this? I have friends who were teachers in RJC. He was head of English. Another one, of course, was head of literature over there. They used to laugh at us. They said that was in the 80s. They said that they knew what those people. I'm sorry, maybe they got a very bad impression of the syndicate there. they said something which I couldn't believe it. They said, your papers got marked there and all that. And over Christmas, some of these markers, they were paid well. They were having their holidays, but they still went back to mark. But there were some of them were tipsy and some were drunk. I mean, they said that to me. So what respect have we to say? Of course, they say that. Of course, the syndicate will say they have another line to check on that. Oh, we can do that as well, right? So it's just the name that I think some parents. I would think it's more the parents that, but I'm not sure of the top leadership that will be willing to change. The present minister, who is also my student, one of my former students, he is not a daredevil like Ong Yi Kang, which did with the support of Taman about the slaying or the changing of the streaming system. Mr. Chan is a very nice person, very brilliant fellow, but whether he will be willing to take this step, that's the next thing. But
For example, in 97, so many changes
yes,
came from ministry. How did you try to bring the teachers along? How did you try to convince them?
yeah, actually it was ongoing changes, but the rapidity of the change, if you look at the time span, I did a calculation last night. The first phase, which we call it the survival driven, was 16 years. Now, Dr. Goh's efficiency driven was about 19 to 20 years. That even then, there were workload increase, the pressure on teachers. Okay, that's true. But this part on the 1997, where Teo Chee Hian initiated the thing with Taman, and it was only 13 years, correct? 13 years, much shorter than the others. Of course, later you have 9 years and 4 years, but that's different because they were not monumental changes like 1997. So I would say that because they condense it and they, at least Teo Chee Hian, he admitted himself. He said he was very, he used the word not ambitious, but he said he was very concerned that things wasn't moving fast enough. He wanted to bring about a drastic reform, and I don't think he had this in mind. Like, we suspect that later ministers like Heng Swee Keat or others were having this pride in that they will leave a legacy, all right, like Goh Keng Swee left a legacy. But Teo Chee Hian, it was quite sincere. He said, no, it's not because I want to build my own credibility, all right? Or maybe as he was speaking as a politician, maybe. Okay, so people won't believe him or whatever. But I've seen him. He was quite sincere that he wanted to improve the school system, and he wanted this thing about thinking school, learning nation, and this thing about IT and NE and all that. Although NE wasn't that drastic, let me say that it was just one small component, and it didn't affect the teachers so much because they could just leave it aside, because infusion, nobody can come and test you whether you infuse into a language. But it was a burden on the school because they had to take down whatever the ministry tell them, hey, you must do this, you must do that, and all that. And they must do survey on that, and I think I refused to carry out. I was called up, and at that time I think was before Taman, yeah. I think Taman came, but not Taman, not him. Somebody else called me up. I think his senior minister of state or something. And I said, look, you have a whole research department doing not only NE testing, but your other things. Why are you pushing this particular one? They said, no, this come from a cabinet. So that's the favorite answer. The cabinet says it. I say everything comes from the cabinet, right? So anyway, um, I don't think NE was so much of that, but there was some stress. Okay, so I agree with you, or from what you phrased your question was this massive, I would say massive change, because it was within a few years, 13 years, less than what Goking Sui had 20 years to do. And the other one, 16, 17 years, the survival driven phase. Correct. So it was a condensed thing. And also, I think by then, IT, spread of IT was really proliferate through the school system. And that also bring about changes in a faster way. All right. In a faster way, because I noticed that by then, you want a message to broadcast, you just send out an email and everyone gets it, right? In those early days, before the IT really came into practice, you set a memo or a circular. Then the teacher, you put it on notice board, teacher don't notice. You have to make sure that you circulate and you had somebody to go around to let them read the thing and then pass it around. So there was slower pace of life. And so this comes about within that period when the whole nation was moving as well. All right. Because as they say, it was the economy or knowledge economy that was moving about. And don't forget the 2000, that year of millennium, there were also drastic changes here and there on several fronts. All right. So things were really, the rapidity was in place, were really moving very fast. So I would say that teachers' life became much more busier. And if they don't know how to manage the time or they don't have this work-life balance, some of them resign. I mean, we lost some good teachers there. Yeah.
Yeah. Shadow education, private tuition.
Shadow education, yeah, sure. What's my take on that?
Yeah.
Okay, I will have to say out front. This is to say that I've helped in some development of tuition centers. My wife, after retirement, taught in one or two tuition center, and I have good friends. It is a strange thing, lah. The claim by those operators, those involved in the industry, I will call it in the tuition industry, is that they help the students who are behind. Okay, but they can afford it, and therefore they go. But even now, most of them try to go there. But let me say that there is one point that my expert teacher said: if your school can teach so well, then there shouldn't be any tuition, right? No, I said no. I counter that by saying that the school are handicapped by the class size. I said in Finland, you don't have tuition centers. What is the class size? I went there personally to check. I can't remember which year I went. I was invited by one of their lecturers and took us around to the various schools. It was my own finance look. By then I was retired. And so I said, look, your class size, even in Britain, is not more than 30, 25, 20. In Finland, was only, it's definitely always less than 20 or fewer than 20, right? 15 to 18 around that, right? So I said the school are bound to have problems with a large class of 40. So I used that argument. So, but they were quite convinced. I mean, at least the experts were convinced. They said that the tuition industry arrived there. But none of the political leaders, I mean, few of the political, or especially at that um, civil servant director education, all that, believe me. I said, look, your class size is just a bit too big. You're inviting the tuition. I said, look, I was once asked to invest in a tuition business. I said, I don't mind losing money, I will invest it. But I now, when I talk about it, I said I would prefer that I lose money so that the class size be smaller. If let abandon them so that your class size be smaller and then they will lose out their business and all that. So that is one reason for the shadow business. But of course, parents being parents, so therefore no one can convince a parent. So I think you may want to ask, what about the parents' point of view? And the parents are really the bugbear. And I've said many times, I don't enjoy dealing with them. I enjoy dealing with the students or the teachers, not the parents, because they come with a set mind. And most parents, I'm not sure why, it's partly perhaps their own feeling. My children never go for tuition. I said, you don't. Okay, they justify lah. My children justify because both of us were teachers, so they said, yeah, because we can depend on you. So I said, but no, we didn't have much time at that point of time. I said, you just have to go through your work diligently with the teachers and all that. That's all. Okay, so parents' attitude, the society in some ways have not brought about the change to the shadow. What do you call it? Shadow what?
Yeah, shadow education.
Shadow education. The big industry of 1.4 billion or whatever it is. Right now, I'm helping somebody who has done platform for the tuition centers and all that. I'm not helping, but they got advice from me or something. But I think you can't help it. And the person who started initiative said they would rather start something and do something so that when they get better or whatever, this school will realize it and they can adopt it and then they can go out of business or whatever. So many of these people, of course, some are mercenary. They just want to make money. But by and large, I don't condemn them. It's the nature of the fact of society that we have come about with this. I mean, we are not as bad as Japan, I suppose, or Korea or that. So, but I think we should follow. I mean, I'm not sure whether we should follow or not, but China did a
Yeah,
very
I was
good.
going to say China, right? Ban the
You
whole
just ban
thing.
the whole thing, and then all of them now are moving to Singapore to start tuition school. Okay, so that's next one.
Students have had to achieve many of these educational aims, right? Throughout all these different phases. Are students being asked to do too much?
Oh,
Right? Can they just be students to go to a school and learn?
yeah,
And have a joy of
okay,
learning, right?
yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, so for example, um, it's because the school feel they have to do so much, so the student get the blunt of the whole thing. Therefore, to me, the family, other part of society should bear some of that. As I started the previous one, that it takes a whole village to educate a child. But if you look at another angle, another perspective, I suppose this is basically due to our culture of being too competitive, Okay. We just want to be number one in everything. And so you want to push everybody to be top. I mean, the expert actually asked me, what's wrong with being number two, number three in the world, or even number 10? So to them, there's no hang up about the whole thing. All right. So our students do get the blunt of the effort by the state or by education as a whole to receive as much as possible. Some should be done by the family, right? But then, of course, you say, what about the broken families? Yeah, then you have a proper way to deal with it, not bringing it to school to bring the school to deal with it. And actually, I refuse to take care of some of those aspects of life which students, let's say, they, I mean, you feel for them, but let's say they lost the key. You come back to school and say you want to look, okay, I will look for you in the school. But if you lose it outside, you mean my teacher has to go and search for you? All right. So those type of responsibility should be left to the child or on. So you don't teach so much of that. Of course, there are certain safety things we have to teach them. So now the school are teaching about scam, I think. I think so. I'm not sure. That's a favorite thing. And so now everything, no, not everything can be solved just through education.
Yeah.
All right. That's the thing. That's LKY's belief. Everything in life in society can be resolved through the institution of education or through the schools and then universities or whatever. I mean, you gradual changes you can do it, but not to sort of dump everything onto the schools, and therefore the students suffer, the teachers suffer, and of course the principal also gets in a problem as well. Yeah.
I just will have one last question, very simple one. Mr. Koh, what would you say are your contributions to education in Singapore?
My contribution. Say that there's any exceptional thing that I've done, but I would definitely say that I make effort to question. That's the only thing. That's my contribution. I question and I try to do it in proper manner. Sometimes it hurt people up there, but it's okay. I mean, you just ask the question, but sometimes it goes in the proper year, like Taman, and he writes down. He will note down quickly and say, "Oh, okay, there's something that I will consider." That's the thing. So that's the only contribution, because basically the other thing are just my duties. Basically, I was brought up and I was blessed to be given the job, first of all, then to be given the opportunity to move up to a position of greater influence. Though I actually never wanted to become, I would prefer to remain a teacher, but it was like thrust upon me, and the principal say, you have greater influence or you play a greater part by being the leader there. I questioned him. I said, no, what do you mean by that? He said, no, then you can influence your teachers or that. I said, but why do I need to do that? He said, that's for the whole education. So maybe Mr. Moswajan has a point lah, but I don't think that necessarily mean that I've done greater thing if I've just remained as a teacher. All right, a good teacher can also perform in the lives of many students, and so you touch their lives, you make the difference there. But here, maybe I made the difference to some of my teachers who got called up by me, or some who I really acknowledge and encourage and became principal later on. So those are the things that roughly I would say. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. That's a
Okay.
great way to end
Yeah.
the
Okay.
discussion today. Yeah, it's been a great
Yeah.
discussion. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.